Western psychology has more or less taken the attitude that it is essential to the psychic integration of Western man for him to be under a condition of more or less constant tension. It is assumed that without pressure the individual will fall apart. We are held together by not only the pressures of our own personalities, but the pressures of our desires, our ambitions, and our attitudes. It is taken for granted that if the individual was not constantly striving after something, he would vegetate. He would cease to develop the resources which we like to associate with the dynamic personality. We like to point out also that Western civilization is a monument to the accomplishment of pressures. If it had not been for a constant pattern of affliction, war, strife, the pressure of situations and circumstances, it is assumed that we would all be back in the Stone Age. Well, we can build a pretty strong case for pressure. We can build a great deal to support the idea that the ambitious man forges ahead in the world, and the person without ambition seldom, if ever, gets too far in the battle of life. Up to very recently, we could philosophize about all these problems. We could say of pressure that we can take it or leave it. But by degrees, many of the beliefs that we have held to be the basic truths of society have been shattered by circumstances which have demonstrated that there is something basically wrong with the concept of the pressured life. The individual may seemingly get a little further under extreme pressure, but he is a little like the old-fashioned horse that was attached to the beer truck back in those good old days of cobblestones and great dray horses pulling huge loads. And very often the load was more than the horse could take. So the driver would lash out with his whip and beat the horse unmercifully. And in a desperate effort to escape further flogging, the horse would maybe get to the top of the difficult hill. And the driver was quite convinced that that's the way to treat a horse. But of course the horse didn't last very long. Very shortly the horse was through as far as its usefulness was concerned, to say nothing of the unfair and terrible damage which we inflicted upon another living thing. There is no gain that we can learn that is permanent or valuable that arises from beating oneself beyond a certain rather limited degree. We are not supposed to be lazy, but we are not supposed to live constantly under tension. The Western man has tried this long enough. And incidentally, he has contributed a great deal to the tension of all other peoples and nations. Probably a good part of the world would be happier than it is today if there had never been a Western civilization, because it was so geared to ambition, to conquest, to the extension of commerce and industry, to the rather ruthless colonization of primitive peoples. But this vast program of success at all costs has not only complicated our lives, but hangs heavy over us at the moment, as other nations are beginning to reach that degree of strength in which they can show their resentment for the ill treatment that Western peoples have given them in the past. So I think about all that this unreasonable ambition has resulted in is sickness, death, and hate. It has brought with it very little that we can say has truly advanced the course of our destiny. But we have created our own patterns of what we consider to be advancement. And we're still struggling with the idea that the more contrivances we can get into orbit, the more advanced we are. Actually, one of these days, the traffic congestion up there will be worse than it is here. And still we will not be very advanced, because this has nothing to do with essential progress. In the East, men have tried to solve this pressure problem. They've had pressures too, probably not nearly as great as ours, nor as continuous. But they've had to work with the pressure problem, and it has become more essential as a problem ever since the East and West began to mingle their resources. Zen takes the attitude that pressure is not in any basic sense the key to success. Pressure is an individual bestowing upon himself a powerful stimulant, which is not really a tonic or a food, but merely a stimulation. The ambitions of Western peoples are not advancing the total character of the individual or the total good of Western culture. These ambitions are simply false stimulants. They are stimulants which cause the individual to develop all kinds of strange personality defects, very much as extreme alcoholism not only weakens character but reveals inherent weaknesses to a most unfortunate degree. So we have to begin to estimate the difference between strength and mere inebriation or stimulation of a false nature. Zen takes the ground that the only way in which you can accomplish a great deal without hurting yourself and without hurting other people is to move from a kind of effortlessness within yourself. The moment you become dramatically aggressive, you also become offensive. The aggressive person is hurting other people, interfering with their rights, damaging their prospects, and to a measure annoying them and destroying their peace of mind. It is not on such a ground of mutual annoyances that progress can be achieved. And what appears to be progress, again, is only a kind of acidity, a psychic toxin, which is mistaken for a legitimate vitality. You can intoxicate a structure, particularly glandular, in the human body, and make it seem to work more rapidly and more successfully than is really the case. But this so-called overfunction is not a proof of strength, but a proof of the weakness of the gland, which is showing a kind of toxic exhaustion and is not actually in a healthy state at all. Zen would like to take the ground that man's success in life is due to the conservation of resources and not the abandonment of self to an energy outburst. Energy is the thing upon which all must be motivated, or by which it must be fueled. Man's supply of energy is therefore really the most priceless thing that he has. As he wastes energy, he begins to experience the lack of it.